Hello everyone, and welcome to this special edition of MSBA's Capitol Watch, our preview of the 2016 session of the Missouri General Assembly. And here with me to discuss that is Mike Reed, our Associate Executive Director for Advocacy, and Mike Grote, our Governmental Relations Consultant for MSBA. Gentlemen, thanks a lot for being with us.
Thank you.
Mike Grote, let's start with you if we could. Let's talk about the General Assembly itself. We're going to have some new leadership in place, aren't we?
So this will be the first session that we've had where these leaders are actually in place from the beginning of session. So last year we had some changes in the last week of session, which saw changes in who our speaker is in the House. So now Todd Richardson will be the Speaker of the Missouri House. Mike Searpoy will be the floor leader of the Missouri House. And those are two great guys, have been fabulous to work with. And I think we're going to see a lot of good things coming out from that leadership team in the House. And also over on the Senate end of the building, we've had elections over the interim with the leaving of Senator Tom Dempsey as pro tem. So now we have Senator Ron Richard as pro tem, and we have Senator Mike Kehoe as floor leader. So again, changes in the Senate, but I think very positive changes, and those are all folks that we've had a good relationship with and have been very good to education. So it should be an exciting time with these new leaders.
So Mike, overall, the general makeup of the General Assembly is roughly the same, is that right?
General makeup still roughly the same. We have a supermajority in the House, supermajority in the Senate of Republicans in both of those chambers. So makeup still roughly the same, correct.
All right. An issue we always care about is funding, and especially the funding of the foundation formula. What's the outlook for that?
So the budget is a very interesting, as it always is, but it looks like it's becoming even more interesting. So we've seen the governor do a withhold here in the last couple months of about roughly $50 million of what was left over in budget from this past year. The argument is that that's being done to fill some shortfalls from the tobacco settlement, and then also looks like we're going to have a very large supplemental budget coming up, and that supplemental is based on expenditures primarily in healthcare to fund the Medicaid program. And so that's roughly going to be about $230 million in supplemental, and those dollars have already been spent. So the legislature essentially has to come up with that money. So then we're starting this next session with a $230 million plus that additional $50 million that's been withheld in those other programs. So roughly we're looking at about a $300 million shortfall. Additionally, a lot of the budget from this past session was based off of the tax amnesty dollars. And what was supposed to be about $40 to $50 million in tax amnesty funds right now is only running at about $10 million in collections that have come in. Now, that tax amnesty period is not over yet. We're still a few weeks away from its conclusion, so we should see, just like everybody pays taxes at the last minute, the amnesty period will happen at the last minute. But still, those dollars are way below where projections were supposed to be at this point in time. So walking in next session, we're going to see one of the tightest budgets. I know we've said that every single year, but every year it gets progressively worse. And this will probably be the tightest budget year that we've experienced in about the last 10 years.
So the outlook for funding increases for the formula pretty slim, you think?
I would say slim would be a very positive scenario at this point in time, unfortunately. And Senator Schaefer in the Senate, who's the appropriations chairman, as well as Representative Flanagan in the House, have always been very good to public education. They found additional resources for us every year and tried to make those dollars happen. I don't see any reason why they won't again this year, but what they're going to have to work with as a starting point is greatly, greatly reduced.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of the formula, Mike Reed, are we going to see any attempts to rewrite that formula this year?
Well, there's some talk around Jefferson City that there's some representatives who think that they may like to rewrite the formula. But to rewrite the formula, you really need more money to come in to figure out how to do it. It's a daunting challenge, so I think it's probably more talk than anything else. But I believe that there'll be some trial balloons on rewriting the formula and all the sort of things that go with that.
Mm-hmm. Another issue that was very visible during the last session was the student transfer bill and how it especially affected the St. Louis area, but some other districts as well. Are we going to see that come back, and then the related issue of charter schools and virtual school expansion?
Well, the people who sponsored it originally said that they would not bring back the expansion of charter schools and the transfer bill, but all things, of course, changed at the legislature, and I believe that there's a lot of talk right now that there is going to be a transfer bill, and that transfer bill will have a lot of expansion of charter into it. Charter schools going into St. Louis County and the counties around it. All of Jackson County is the rumor. And again, once again, we have the situation of charter schools expanding without any sort of situation where they become more under the, make sure that they're doing exactly what they should do. So I believe that it's going to be out there. I'm not sure that there's a lot of will to get a charter bill and a transfer bill going. However, I think there'll be a lot of talk about it again this year. Mike?
I agree.
Mike, another issue that seems to be emerging not just in Missouri but around the country is the idea of students opting out of certain aspects of their education. Are we going to see legislation along that line?
I think so. There's a movement to have students opt out of certain tests. There's also a movement of students opting out of parts of curriculum that are out there. The testing opt-out seems to be very big on the East Coast. But we have problems with that because there are federal laws about that and federal rules and regulations that we have to test a certain number of students. So I believe we're going to have a large discussion about opting out of tests and how that affects students in the state of Missouri.
That's kind of a slippery slope, isn't it? I mean, where do you draw the line on what students could opt out of and what
Yeah,
not?
I vaguely remember a long time ago wanting to opt out on a whole bunch of tests that usually because I didn't study enough. And that's while we laugh, that's actually what could happen. And then what happens that? And then when are we going to make sure that kids want to opt out because they didn't study last night or whatever? And then it's a very slippery slope to go down.
Mm-hmm. Mike Grote, another issue that we've dealt with many times over the years is school start date. Are we going to see attempts to restrict that some more?
I think we will. And a few years ago we came up with what we thought was a very good solution. And unfortunately there's still entities around the state, whether they be in the agriculture or restaurant or other entertainment areas that rely on students essentially as employees, that are looking for a way to continually shorten that school start date time period so that way they have access to those individuals over a longer period of time. And clearly we think that educating those students is a more important path, and we'll continue to work with folks on finding a solution that ensures that we're able to have those students in the classroom so they can receive the education they need.
Mm-hmm. And Mike, of course, 2016 is an election year. So how does that affect the dynamic of what might occur in the General Assembly this year?
So election years are always crazy years in my opinion. Especially when this is a big election year for Missouri. So we've got the majority of our statewides, with the exception of our state auditor, are up this year. Naturally, all of the legislature, all of the House, and half of the Senate. And so those politics clearly come into the legislature in terms of what items get taken up, what items get voted on, what those vote counts look like, in order to help individuals that are running for office, whether they be in a contested seat or not. And so typically in these big election years, we don't see some of the larger items don't ever make it to the surface because, quite frankly, the concern over what that vote count looks like is problematic come an election cycle. It's usually a good year, though, to accomplish some of those lower level issues. And clearly there's a number of issues that we deal with in the education field, and so it gives us an opportunity to accomplish some of those and hopefully take some of the bad items that Mike mentioned, whether it be transfer or opt-out, kind of off the table.
Mm-hmm. And Mike Reed, of course, a key to our advocacy effort is not just you guys who are in the Capitol every day, but our school board members throughout the state, and they continue to play an important role.
An extremely important role. It's very important that our members talk to the representatives and senators about how the actions in Jefferson City affect the local school districts. How does what they do in Jefferson City have an effect on the students and on the operation of the school district? Cutting taxes in Jefferson City may raise taxes in the country because there's only so much money and it takes money to run a school district. So it's extremely important that our members keep asking us questions and follow us on this program as well as any other ways that we have in all of our meetings because the best lobbyists that we have are our local members talking to their elected officials talking to elected officials.
And once again this year, Mike, we'll be having visits to Jefferson City, those opportunities for our members to come to Jefferson.
Yes, we have legislative forum in February, as well as S-band meetings every Tuesday coming up in the session. And it's extremely important that our members come and have one-on-one with their elected officials.
All right, Mike Reed, Mike Grote, should be another interesting legislative session as always, and we appreciate your work and your insight into what's going on in Jefferson City and how it affects our schools. And we thank you for joining us on this special edition of MSBA's Capitol Watch.